You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
As of July 4th, 2019, our great nation turned 243 years old. I asked myself a question. I wonder what was the last lynching that occurred in each state. Once I began my search to find the answer to this question, I discovered how little others knew about the practice of lynching people in America, and Freedom Speaks podcast was born. I am your host, Craig Woodall. Although the number of blacks lynched is far greater than any other race, there are other races represented in the total tally of lynchings in America. Freedom Speaks podcast is not solely a look into crimes against blacks, but rather a look into true crimes against humanity. Maya Angelou said, "History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again." Join us every other Monday as we tell these stories. Find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcasts. Search Freedom Speaks Podcast. You can also visit our website, which is freedomspeakspodcast.com. Subscribe, rate, review. You'll be glad you did, and so will we.
Hello, Hellions. I'm Annie in rainy Boston.
And I'm Johanna, usually from Vienna, but still in exile in my mom's house. And you just heard Greg M. Woodall from Freedom Speaks podcast. I have to admit, I didn't have a chance yet to listen to his episodes, but I do think he brings light to a very important topic. So why don't we all head over to his podcast afterwards and check out his episodes?
Definitely.
Annie, how are you doing?
I'm okay, thanks. So our Facebook group knows. I'm sorry to say that my wonderful mom passed away last week on Wednesday. She'd been sick for a long time, and she'd had a lot of ups and downs over the last, going on 20 years, honestly. But she'd been steadily declining for about a month. Maybe two. And I'm just really glad that we were all together and that we were able to keep her at home, which was very important to her. It's a very strange time because I know a lot of people are very centered on the quarantine now, which I get, but we've just been all keeping vigil with my mom for the past week. And so sort of in a bubble, not, as aware as usual about what would be going on. And now it's just weird because we can't do anything. We can't plan any kind of funeral. The church isn't doing funeral masses, even one just for the family. It's a strange time. So we'll do something when COVID-19 is under control, but it's been really strange. Usually when somebody you love passes away, you at least are busy with making funeral arrangements, and we can't do anything.
I'm so sorry, that you and your family have to go through this at this moment in time. It makes everything so much harder. But I know that you're planning a big party for her once people can gather again.
Yes. My mom loved a party, so we're definitely going to get people together on the Cape, and then probably we'll have another party when we're in the UK next time. But thanks so much for taking up the lion's share of the work to get this week's podcast ready in time.
You know that anytime.
I was not in a place to do it. Let's see, is there anything else we need to talk about before we get started?
Yes. Annie, I'm sorry I forgot to tell you something. So, like a week or so before you told us about the Crawford family murders, I got a message by one of our Hellions, Chris from Australia, and he suggested this case to me, and I told him that it will be right up your alley and that I will tell you about it, but I completely forgot. And then when you told me that you're gonna do the Crawford family murder, I seriously didn't put two and two together when we recorded that episode. And he wrote again a couple of days ago and saying that usually he always looks up the locations of our cases, but this time he didn't have to, as he knows the area so well because it's only like 10 miles from his home. I'm sorry, Chris.
So funny, Chris. That was a great suggestion. Great minds think alike. And I'm jealous that you live 10 miles from Port Arthur because that really looks like a beautiful place that I want to visit when we make it to Australia someday. That was such a sad and infuriating case.
Yeah, it was. This week, due to recent events, we figured it's time to relax a little bit. So we will be talking about a few horrible moments in history that still hold some precious humor, dark humor. But we're Fresh Hell, so dark humor is to be expected, I'd say.
Yeah.
We just didn't feel like wrapping our minds around horrible crimes this week, and we thought you might appreciate a little more lighthearted distraction just as well.
Yes, definitely. Warning to our listeners, especially if you're new here, this episode will probably be a little bit more chatty than usual, and there might be more laughter than usual.
Or how some people call female laughter giggling, which is weird to me. I hate it, but okay.
It's creepy. No. Like, if you describe a grown woman as giggling, I don't like that. Anyway. Yeah, we're always a conversational podcast. That's kind of the point of the podcast, which we thought was obvious because we're two people on different continents having a conversation about crime, but apparently it's a surprise to some. So, yeah. Johanna, where would you like to start?
Yes, my pleasure.
All right.
So, first of all, I would like to talk about Tycho Brahe. He was a Danish astronomer who was born on 14th of December 1546 in the Danish peninsula Scania. He lucked out. He was born into one of the wealthiest noble families in Denmark. His grandfathers and great-grandfathers had served in the council of the Danish kings. He could even find the Swedish royal family, the Vasas, in his wide-branched family tree. His maternal grandfather, the Lord of Bohus Castle, I'm sorry if I'm butchering Scandinavian names today. I'm trying my best, as always.
They sound right to me.
His maternal grandfather, the Lord of Bohus Castle, was second cousin to the Swedish King Gustav, who had liberated the Swedes from the Danes. So Tycho was born at his family's estate Knutstorp Castle, which is nowadays in the south of Sweden. But back then, when he was born, it was still part of Denmark. And Tycho was the oldest of a total of 12 children. I have to say only 4 of them died when they were still very young. The other 8 made it into adulthood.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Well, they had money, so.
Well, fair enough.
When he was 2 years old, he was sent to live with his uncle Jørgen Thygesen Brahe. Why his parents decided to have the young boy live with the relative is unclear. He was the only one of their children who was not raised in their family home. But Tycho was treated well by his uncle and his aunt. They remained childless and treated him as if he was their own son. And he was also their sole heir.
That's probably why he went to live with them. I could be completely wrong, but I think sometimes in families, if one member of the family, like if your sister had 4 sons, but you had no children, you might raise one of her children as your own. I could be completely making this up, but I really feel like this is something I read. Maybe it was in Game of Thrones, though, so I don't know.
So, what happened? He was attending Latin school from age 6. He started studying at the University of Copenhagen at age 12. He studied law, but started to be interested in astronomy. And in 1560, so when he was 14 years old, he was able to witness the solar eclipse that took place that year. I think it must have been super impressive for the young boy. But that's interesting because the fact that the predictions and calculations for the eclipse were in fact one day off encouraged him to find more accurate ways of astronomical calculations. Please forgive me, I'm not going to get into all the detail of his studies, frankly, because I'm not educated at all in these matters, so I leave this to more competent people. But let me just say that he traveled to different universities, for example, the one in Leipzig, Rostock. He deepened his knowledge, he spent his days and of course nights observing the stars, keeping exact diaries and notes of his findings. So he was really one of the big, great names in astronomy. When he was 19 years old, he returned to Denmark only to find the country in war with Sweden. His uncle was now a celebrated war hero as he had helped in the sinking of a Swedish battleship. But unfortunately, Jørgen died shortly after from a fever. There's a legend about Jørgen's death, and it's just the kind of story we are here for today. So here it goes. It is said that Jørgen had spent a night out drinking with the Danish King Frederick II, and they both got so wasted that somehow the king had managed to fall into one of the canals in Copenhagen. If you have never been to Copenhagen, it is called the Venice of the North.
Wait, I thought Amsterdam was the Venice of the North.
Yeah, Amsterdam is Venice of the North too. So I checked because I too had it in my head that Amsterdam is the Venice of the North. Guess what? There are more than 35 cities called Venice of the North, which kind of makes it a little bit less impressive in my opinion.
I don't know. Now I feel like I want to see Venice and then compare it to all of the Venices of the North Venices. Is Bourton on the Water the Venice of the Cotswolds or like the Venice of England? I think it might be, actually. Do you just need a really pretty river or canal running through your town to be suddenly called the Venice
Probably like 5 bridges and that's it. Then you're Venice of the North.
Because there's a swamp over by my parents' house. And I'm going to start calling it the Venice of Cape Cod when it floods in the spring.
Why is there no Venice of the South? I mean, Italy is not the most southern place we have on this planet.
That's true.
Okay, so they both were wasted. The king was... he ended up in one of the canals. And Jürgen Brahe, being his drinking buddy and a war hero, he of course jumped after the king to save him from drowning. And that's how he caught pneumonia, which led to his death.
Oh, yeah, canal water pneumonia too.
So Jürgen's wife inherited everything, but they also were very, very generous towards Tycho. So we know that Tycho Brahe was this great astronomer. By the way, he's not the only astronomer in his family. One of his siblings, his younger sister Sophia, was also an astronomer. She assisted her brother with many of his astronomical observations. And as she is barely known and has to spend eternity in her famous brother's shadows, I say cheers to Sophia Brahe.
Oh, yeah.
All right, back to Tycho, because we now want to talk about the parts of his life that fit the theme of our little podcast here. First of all, maybe some of you will have heard about this before. Tycho Brahe had an artificial nose made of silver and gold. How did he end up with such a posh face prosthetic, you might ask?
I was about to.
Well, it was in 1566 when he was studying at the University of Rostock. That's in the north of Germany, but it's not called Venice of the North. There in Rostock one night he had been invited to an engagement party by one of the professors. And there he found himself very drunk, arguing with a Danish nobleman who was also his third cousin by the name of Manderup Parsberg. And they were fighting about what any red-blooded young man will find himself fighting about at one point in his life. Who was the better mathematician?
Oh, maths, they can get pretty dramatic sometimes.
So this fight took place on 10th of December, but if you are thinking now, okay, they were wasted and had a fight about a stupid thing and that's the end of it, then you're mistaken. They started to argue about the same thing again only 19 days later on 29th of December. But this time, they meant business. They agreed that the only way to settle this dispute was a duel in the dark. So they did. And Tycho ended up not only with a scar on his forehead, but also with a missing nose, because Manderup had simply cut it off.
Okay. I have to say, that is an odd choice of blow to strike in a duel. You just sneak up and slice his fucking nose off? How? Why?
I mean, they were both drunk and dueling in the dark. What other outcome was there to be expected?
Yeah, that's fair.
I honestly don't think he did it on purpose, if that helps.
Yeah, I mean.
And the two reconciled later, so I guess Tycho held actually no grudge.
Oh, see? That is good news.
Thank God he was a highly respected student at the university, so he obviously received the best care possible. And that's how Tycho Brahe ended up with a silver and gold prosthetic nose that was kept in place by some kind of glue or paste or gluey paste. And he had to carry around a little, box.
Nose glue?
Where you put your lip balm in, this kind of thing, I imagine. Yeah, he had to always carry it with him to reattach his nose. I don't know, it seems so impractical to me.
Yeah.
I guess the reason why he wouldn't go for a conventional wax nose, I think he was just a really eccentric character.
Okay, yeah. I don't know how to feel about him now. It's like he wanted to draw attention to the nose that might fall off at any minute. How bizarre. How bizarre. Sorry, I feel like you have to say that twice. It's required.
That's not all that I have to tell you about Tycho.
There's more?
He not only owned 1% of the Danish money at one point in his life, he also, please hold yourself onto your chair now, Annie, he also owned a pet moose.
A pet moose?
Yes.
This is amazing. Tell me everything.
Please don't get upset with me. I know we usually don't talk about the death of pets. I don't know, but this story is so bizarre that I want to make an exception.
Okay.
So, this moose lived in his mansion with him and seemed to have been a very good boy. He would often walk alongside Tycho's carriage and accompany him when he went out. the not so great thing, the moose, I tried to find the name of the moose. I had no luck. If anybody out there knows the name of Tycho Brahe's moose, please let me know. So the not so great thing, the moose liked beer. Now, Tycho Brahe liked to show off his very unusual pet to his guests and friends, and one evening the moose attended a banquet in a nobleman's castle. I have no idea if the moose was going there alone or if he was just the plus one of Tycho Brahe. I have no idea. So the moose drank a lot of beer there. Did he just slurp up everything he could find, or did they give him the beer on purpose because they found it funny? I guess it was a combination of both, you know.
Yeah, it's just so funny to me to imagine a full-grown moose just daintily clopping around inside this little hooves. Clop, clop.
Yeah, now comes the sad part. So the moose was very, very drunk, and it fell down a flight of stairs and it broke its neck.
No.
It died.
Well, at least it was probably a very quick death for that moose. And this is both tragic and unsurprising to me, because I have to tell you that moose are more clumsy than you would think. Our family moose is known to be very clumsy. She almost fell into a waterfall in Ireland. There's this really famous crater in Iceland. It's beautiful. Björk did a concert in it. She almost fell into that fucking crater. I refused to even attempt to go near Dunn's Rivers Falls in Jamaica with her. Moose are terrifyingly clumsy, at least our moose is.
So I still think it's funny everyone calls you Sister Moose.
I know, but she's just the moose.
And I also think it's funny that it's the plural of moose is not meese.
Yeah, moose is moose.
Because it's goose, geese.
Yes.
Okay, I'm almost done with this.
No, I'm enjoying this
story. But there's one last thing that I want to tell you about Tycho Brahe, and that thing is part of every life story eventually, and that's his death. I remember hearing about his death back in high school, and it really scared me for life, seriously. Okay. Because apparently Tycho had been ill for a while, and he had tried to heal himself with alchemy. And in 1599, he had moved to Prague, where he had worked with his assistant Johannes Kepler on the so-called Rudolphine tables, which is a star catalogue and planetary tables, and it's used to, calculate the positions of planets at any certain time. So on 13th of October 1601, Tycho Brahe had attended a banquet and during this banquet he refused to use the restroom as it would have been a breach of etiquette.
Okay.
And when he finally returned back home, he was no longer able to urinate, and he died only 11 days later on October 24th, 1601, from what was believed a ruptured bladder. And it is said that shortly before he passed away, he suggested his own epitaph. Quote, "He lived like a sage and died like a fool." End quote.
Same.
I remember as a teenager being so scared to die of a ruptured bladder.
I never heard this story, and it never occurred. No.
That even is possible, right?
Yeah. Ow.
So 300 years after his death in 1901, his grave was opened and the body was analyzed by scientists, and they stated that they found an unusual high amount of mercury in his bones, which led to rumors that Tycho Brahe was in fact poisoned. And there were a couple of suspects. So for one, Johannes Kepler, his assistant, and the motive would have been that he wanted access to Tycho's laboratory and notes and finish the Rudolphine tables. He was more of a fan of Copernicus and wanted to finish the Rudolphine tables based on the solar system by Copernicus.
Sure.
Kepler was very close to Brahe and could have easily poisoned him. He was also the one who spread the story about the ruptured bladder everywhere. So did he just try to avoid rumors coming up?
Oh, maybe.
Another suspect, one of Tycho's cousins, sent by the Danish king because Tycho was said to be having an affair with the king's mother. Or was it just an accidental poisoning, brought on by himself when he was trying to cure himself? So in 2010, Tycho's remains were examined once more, and this time the scientists found actually no high mercury concentration in his bones.
Oh.
So a ruptured bladder seems to be indeed the cause of death for this trailblazing astronomer. They did find, however, that his famous gold and silver nose was in fact made of brass.
Oh, well, That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing that everybody believed it was gold and silver for such a long time, because there's a big difference between gold and silver and brass if you're trying to be fancy.
Plus, it apparently stained his skin skin area around it green.
I was just going to say, did his skin turn green like a cheap ring? Oh, no. But it could also be, I mean, really, he could have died of, at that time, it could have been a ruptured appendix, it could have been his gallbladder. Like, there are any number of things that, would cause you some abdominal discomfort and you would die some days later. Huh. That's great. I never heard that one.
So why don't we pause here for a quick word by today's sponsor, Elemis. Annie, you got me so interested in their milk bath and body oil the last time we talked about them that I ordered them, and now I'm just waiting for my package to arrive because it's still cold enough to enjoy a long, hot bath. I usually end up watching some true crime or reading the newest issues of my German true crime subscription while, in a hot bath for an hour and a half.
Yeah, you're going to absolutely love it. That milk bath is a winter skin savior, I promise. And they really do make the best, most fragrant oils for your body. They're a luxury skincare brand out of the UK, and they're cruelty-free, which is very important to Johanna and me. There's one product in particular that not only has cult status globally, it's won a bunch of awards and is always given a shout out by beauty editors for its amazing anti-aging properties. It's called Pro Collagen Marine Cream, and the secret to this super cream is seaweeds and lots of them. Elemis is known for harnessing the power of science and nature to make serious skincare that gives you results. Your skin is important, so put the lotion on it already.
So Elemis is offering a deal for our Hellions. So visit www.elemis.com/US/freshhell to sign up and claim a sample of their best-selling Pro Collagen Marine Cream for just $10, free shipping included, and normally that's worth $45. But make sure you hurry, it's first come, first serve.
Definitely, and you'll find a link to it in our show notes. Okay, so now I want to take you back to ancient Greece to the year 525 BCE, because it was somewhere around that year that Aeschylus was born. He was an ancient Greek playwright and is even considered to be the father of tragedy.
Did I ever tell you that I was in drama club as a teenager, or what you would consider drama club in the US? We once did The Birds by Aristophanes, and I was playing a golden pheasant.
Oh, I was also in high school drama club, and that costume sounds amazing.
It was not. It was really not.
All right, so Aeschylus was born in a small village close to Athens, and when he was a young boy and young man, he used to work in the vineyards that surrounded the lush valley he grew up in, until one night something amazing happened. Dionysus himself visited the young Aeschylus in his dream and told him to dedicate his life to writing tragedies. Dionysus is the god of wine, grapes, fertility, ritual ecstasy, and theater, so it makes sense that he would choose a guy working in a vineyard to answer his calling. As soon as Aeschylus woke from his sleep, he started to write and write and write, and he was able to present his first play to an audience in the year 499 BCE when he was around 25 or 26. But he was not only a writer, he was also a soldier, and he fought for the Greeks against both the Persian kings Darius I at the Battle of Marathon and later Xerxes I.
Yeah, that's the one who fought King Leonidas I in 300.
Oh, that's right. That's what the plot of 300 is about. God, it's been a while since I've seen that. Okay. But he did still find time to write, and it is believed that he wrote between 70 and 90 plays. Jesus, this guy. Show off.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Unfortunately, only 7 of those survived. What if he only wrote 7? What if he said he wrote 90, but only 7 survived, but really he only wrote 7? Well, in any case, all right, the Persians, 7 Against Thebes, the Suppliants, the Orestia trilogy, which includes Agamemnon, the Libation Bearers, and Eumenides, as well as the only one that I've read, Prometheus Bound. But it's disputed if the last one is even by Aeschylus, or if it was written by his son, Euphorion.
I love that name. Probably because Euphoria is my favorite perfume.
Oh, Euphorion is a great name, but you'd never find it on, like, a souvenir keyring. Do they even make keyrings for kids anymore? Did they stop doing that when they stopped letting 8-year-olds let themselves into an empty house? I don't even know anymore how childhood works. All right, so Aeschylus was almost killed by an angry mob once, and here's what happened. So apparently he was a member of a cult that worshipped the goddess Demeter, and this cult was known as the, just to let you know, I'm probably mispronouncing everything in this episode, but the Eleusinian Mysteries. Members were granted access to secret knowledge about the afterlife, but you were under no circumstances allowed to share these secrets with anybody. But it seems he did share some parts in one of his plays, and the audience got really angry and they tried to stone him to death on the spot, but he was able to flee and hide in a temple. A trial took place, but he was acquitted, apparently because the jury took his bravery during battle into account. All right. So now it's 456 or 455 BCE, and Aeschylus is spending some time in Sicily, where he had spent many a time before. So picture it. Sicily, 455 BCE. Sorry, I had to. An unlovely day. He was just outside the city walls when an eagle flew over his head carrying a tortoise in his talons. Can you imagine my reaction if that fucking eagle had a turtle as well? I'd still be medicated from the excitement. So this particular eagle was hungry and carrying around this heavy tortoise, and he sees what looked like a large stone below, and he thinks that it would be the perfect place to drop the tortoise, to crack it open, and then enjoy a nice meal. So he did. He dropped the tortoise. But unfortunately, the eagle had mistaken the playwright's bald head for a rock. Aeschylus' death is the only known death brought onto a human being by a tortoise. Of course, with a bizarre death like this one, there's also a legend surrounding it. According to the Roman author Plinius, Aeschylus was given a prophecy that said that he would be killed by a falling object, and to avoid this, he tried to say outside most of the time.
Well, that didn't work.
I know, but brace yourself, because it's tragic. It looks like that prophecy never really existed, but it does make the story a lot more interesting. And just like Tycho Brahe, it looks like he wrote his own epitaph well in advance, and interestingly enough, he didn't mention his achievements in Greek drama at all, only his military involvements, because on the monument that marked his grave, it once read, quote, "Beneath this stone lies Aeschylus, son of Euphorion, the Athenian, who perished in the wheat-bearing lands of Gela. Of his noble prowess, the grove of Marathon can speak, and the long-haired Persian knows it well." End quote. You know I love a good epitaph. Of course, now I have to close this one with one of Aesop's fables called The Eagle and the Tortoise. Quote, "A tortoise, lazily basking in the sun, complained to the seabirds of her hard fate, that no one would teach her how to fly. An eagle, hovering near, heard her lamentation, and demanded what reward she would give him if he would take her aloft and float her in the air. 'I will give you,' she said, 'all the riches of the Red Sea.' 'I will teach you to fly then,' said the eagle, and taking her up in his talons, he carried her almost to the clouds, when suddenly letting her go, she fell on a lofty mountain and dashed her shell to pieces. The tortoise exclaimed in the moment of her death, 'I have deserved my present fate, for what had I to do with wings and clouds, who can with difficulty move about the earth? If men had all they wished, they would often be ruined.'" End quote. Which, certainly true.
That was a bizarre death.
Yeah. There are a lot of deaths that just make me feel like it was meant to be.
Yeah.
That's for sure one of them. Because what are the odds?
What are the odds? That's true. Probably is kind of a Final Destiny situation. Okay, so my next one involves Napoleon, and I mentioned several times that I'm really into the history of Napoleon and his life, and Annie had made some remarks too that I'm into Napoleon and his life. But this time I want to tell you a story about the time he got attacked by rabbits.
What?
And I want to keep this short. I will not start out with Napoleon Bonaparte was born on 15th of August 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica. Let's skip all this, save it for another time, okay?
Okay.
All right. I read a couple of versions of this incident, but it seems that it took place in 1807. Napoleon had just signed the Treaty of Tilsit between France on the one side, Prussia and Russia on the other side. So, understandably, Napoleon looked for a fun way to celebrate. He was not much of a drinker, he actually preferred coffee and tea and sometimes watered down wine. So, what other fun thing to do for the Emperor of France? How about a hunt? A rabbit hunt, maybe? I'm not the biggest fan of hunting myself. I'm okay with it if it's for food or, manage wildlife population when needed, but just for fun, don't like it.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for people who hunt for food and use the whole animal. I know many friends and family who do that, and I think it's wonderful. But I think trophy hunting is appalling. I think that people who hunt just for trophies are sociopaths or desperately overcompensating for serious shortcomings, shall we say.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so rabbit hunt it is, and Napoleon's chief of staff, Louis-Alexandre Berthier, he was ordered to organize the hunt. And Berthier, of course, made a whole spectacle out of it, with delicious food was served and high-ranked military was invited, and rabbits were collected to make it easier for the emperor and his party to hunt them down. Yeah. Some say that Berthier had his men collect more than 3,000 rabbits, but it's also possible that it was just a couple of hundred. Who knows? Who's to say? And they did put them in cages until the hunting party was ready.
Yeah, that's a lot of rabbits.
It's a lot, yeah. And they're gonna regret it very soon. Napoleon and his hunting party were ready to go. The rabbits were released, and instead of running away, they grouped together and they started to storm in the French emperor's direction.
Monty Python style.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Oh no.
Of course, at first everybody was laughing. I mean, it's these cute little bunnies coming at you. Ha ha ha. Funny. Yeah. Soon enough, nobody felt like laughing anymore because hundreds or maybe thousands of rabbits came closer and closer, and they reached the hunting party, started to climb their legs and biting their coats. So Annie, you were traumatized by E.T. as a child, yeah? When I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents brought the, VHS of Watership Down. Yeah, they thought it's a cute movie about cute bunnies.
No.
Still can't watch this movie today.
I've never seen it. Fortunately, all the adults in my life decided it would be a bad move, and
don't watch it.
Yeah, but I just keep imagining this wave of sharp teeth and fluffy little ears.
Yeah, blood in front of their mouth or something like this. Yeah, that's how I imagine it. Napoleon tried desperately to shoo away the rabbits with the help of his riding crop. Oh. The others used sticks and the guns to scare them off.
Oh, poor rabbits.
So Napoleon ran to his carriage thinking he would be safe there, but no. It looks as if the bunnies had learned from the great strategist himself. They were splitting into 2 groups, avoiding the hunting party and heading for the imperial carriage. They started to climbing the coach, some even jumped inside, and the attack only ended when the coachman did crack his whip loudly and the horses began to move. Rumor has it that while the carriage rolled away, Napoleon was flinging out bunnies left and right out the window of his carriage.
Oh no. Oh man. So, did this really happen? What happened?
So it looks like Berthier had made one huge mistake. Instead of telling his men to look for wild rabbits, he had them collect the rabbits from all the close-by farms and markets. Oh. So they were tame rabbits who were used to being fed by humans. Once the cages were opened, wild rabbits would have taken off,
Yeah.
Because they would have been scared. But the tame bunnies assumed that the emperor and his men were there to feed them. And I guess when the humans didn't provide them with some veggies, the rabbits, they just got rightfully upset.
I mean, that's fair. Yeah, that's... Still, though, that's so many bunnies. Oh.
Mm-hmm. It's too many.
Wow, that's bad.
And as we're talking about Napoleon right now, did you know that after Napoleon died on St. Helena in 1821, his penis was cut off by the examiner?
No.
Yeah, I read that the doctor was kind of upset about the fact that he was not mentioned in Napoleon's will, so he did steal his penis and send it on tour, displayed on a red velvet cushion so that everyone could make fun of the apparently rather small size. Which I think is highly unfair because we all know that there are showers and there are growers, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there it was, Napoleon's small penis, or what looked like his small penis, and it was not preserved, so over the years it shriveled up even more and shrunk and shrunk. In 1916, the penis was up for an auction, but nobody cared to buy the emperor's willy. Nobody. Oh. So the penis became kind of a curiosity for the owner who showed it off at parties.
How does that segue begin? Hey everyone. I'm imagining more of a hey, who wants to see my penis? Well, not my penis. It's Napoleon, I'm just there's so many ways this could go wrong. Don't get me wrong, I would 100% want to see it, but...
I would look at it, of course.
Oh yeah. Anytime. If it's like, this is awful, let me see. What's...
So from 1927, it was showcased in an exhibition in New York, I think. I could be wrong. I think it was New York. In 1977, a urologist purchased it for $3,000. That's not enough money for a penis.
No.
So he placed it in a box, put it under his bed, and forgot all about it.
Oh, no.
So then 30 years passed, and the urologist died, and the penis in the box was found, which must be so weird. Imagine you're just, cleaning out your grandfather's apartment and you find this penis box.
You're like, what's in this box? Unbelievable.
Okay, so the penis was found and it was auctioned off once more, and this time it sold for $100,000.
Wow.
So now you know what happened to Napoleon's penis.
Wow. I had absolutely no idea that Napoleon's post-mortem penis had done more traveling than most living people do. I had no idea. I wonder if that was the inspiration for the SNL hit Dick in a Box with Andy Samberg and Justin Timberlake. Do you know that song?
Mm-mm.
I'll have to post it to the Facebook group. Sorry. Oh, man. These are some fun facts we're throwing out to you all today. I hope you're,
Right?
I hope you're all feeling diverted. All right. So let's see. I would like to end today's episode with a story about running. Johanna, how is your running going?
I'm still hanging in there. I skipped a week because, the craziness at the moment didn't make me feel like it. I didn't have the headspace for it.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. There's always next week. But I told you that Paul once ran a marathon, and I think you mentioned once that your husband also had run the Vienna Marathon, I think, once.
Mm-hmm. After a night of heavy drinking, which... Yeah.
Today, I'm going to tell you about the mayhem that was the marathon that took place during the Olympic Games in St. Louis in 1904. Do you know about this one?
Nope.
All
Don't
right.
know that one.
So, this happened during the Summer Olympics in 1904. It took place in St. Louis, Missouri, where my mom was born. And also, side note, I'm sorry to everybody from the Lindbergh episode who's in St. Louis, because of course I know it's St. Louis. It's just that I'm used to the song from Meet Me in St. Louis, which goes, Meet Me in St. Louis. So if you've never heard the song, then I sound insane. If you know of both, you've hopefully forgiven me by now. All right. 12 nations participated in 94 events in 17 disciplines. And to compare, 207 nations participated in the last Summer Olympics. That was in Rio in 2016. And they had 306 events in 41 disciplines. And it looks like our Summer Olympics have just been postponed a year. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
To next year, yeah.
All right. Well, that's something to look forward to we weren't expecting for next year. So in 1904, the modern Olympic Games had just been started in 1896 by Pierre de Coubertin. This was the first time the Games were going to be held in the United States. At the same time, the World's Fair was being held in St. Louis to celebrate the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase, and the Olympic Games and the World Fair were kind of tied together that year. The World Fair even had their own sporting events. One was called, air quotes, Anthropology Days, which could be, in theory, interesting, but was, in fact, horrific. So the whole event had a group of people who were living in the international villages and who were presented to the public as quote-unquote savages compete in such competitions as mudslinging and climbing a greased pole. Pierre de Coubertin did definitely disapprove of this event. The marathon was supposed to be the most prestigious event of the whole spectacle, as it is still a reminder of the Greek history. It dates back, of course, to the Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, which, of course, Aeschylus participated in, and the legend of the Herald, who ran from Marathon to Athens. But the marathon in St. Louis was not a heroic grand event. It was a complete debacle. So what happened? First of all, only a handful of the 32 participants were actually trained marathon runners. The rest were pretty much middle-distance runners and underdogs. Karen Abbott writes about the marathon in a 2012 article for Smithsonian Magazine. Quote, "A few of the runners were recognized marathoners who had either won or placed in the Boston Marathon or had placed in previous Olympic marathons, but the majority of the field was composed of middle-distance runners and assorted oddities. American Americans Sam Meller, A.L. Newton, John Lorden, Michael Spring, and Thomas Hicks, all experienced marathoners, were among the favorites. Another American, Fred Lors, did all his training at night because he had a day job as a bricklayer and earned his spot in the Olympics by placing in a, quote, special 5-mile race sponsored by the Amateur Athletic Union. Among the leading oddities were 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon, 2 men of the Tswana tribe of South Africa who were in St. Louis as part of the South African World's Fair exhibit and who arrived at the starting line barefoot, and a Cuban national and former mailman named Felix Carvajal, who raised money to come to the States by demonstrating his running prowess throughout Cuba, once trekking the length of the island. Cuba is a long island. Anyhow, upon his arrival in New Orleans, he lost all of his money in a dice game and had to walk and hitchhike to St. Louis. At 5 feet tall, he presented a slight but striking figure at the starting line, attired in a white long-sleeve shirt, long dark pants, a beret, and a pair of street shoes. It's like me showing up for a marathon. That would be me. One fellow Olympian took pity, found a pair of scissors, and cut Carvajal's trousers at the knee. End quote. So, it's just not what you imagine for a marathon. This really isn't it. To be fair, I want to see this race. So this took place in August of 1904, and temperatures were way above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which would be 32 Celsius. And the course was considered to be extremely difficult. All right, so from that same Smithsonian article, quote, the 24.85-mile course, which one fair official called, quote, the most difficult a human being was ever asked to run over, quote, wound across roads inches deep in dust. There were 7 hills, varying from 100 to 300 feet high, some with brutally long ascents. In many places, cracked stone was strewn across the roadway, creating perilous footing, and the men had to constantly dodge crosstown traffic, delivery wagons, railroad trains, trolley cars, and people walking their dogs. There were only 2 places where athletes could secure fresh water, from a water tower at 6 miles and a roadside well at 12 miles. End quote. I just can't with this marathon. So listen, if you've been stuck at home and you're really sad because you haven't been able to do all the running you wanted to do, it could be worse. I mean, this is... Okay, so apparently the organizers of the games wanted to test the effects of dehydration on long-distance runners. And another thing that made the event extremely difficult for the runners, their coaches and medical professionals were accompanying them by riding in cars next to them and in front of them. And so the roads were, as mentioned before, unpaved and dusty. So dust and gravel were swirled up into the air by the car tires, which made breathing almost impossible and caused the participants to cough for most of the almost 25-mile run. Jesus. One runner named William Garcia almost died because the dust had coated his esophagus and damaged his stomach. Another one couldn't stop vomiting and had to give up. A third runner was chased off by wild dogs. Side note, this all sounds exactly how I imagined marathons would be. But it still doesn't have enough dogs for my liking. Just for the record. All right. Now, I mentioned the runner from Cuba, Felix Carvajal, before. So he was really something. So at first, he just strolled along the route, chatting with the spectators on the way. Then he approached a car and he asked for one of the peaches that the driver was eating. And the driver was like, no, this is my peach. So Felix snatched it out of his hand and ran off. Then he got to an apple orchard and started to eat. Again, this guy sounds just like me. Showed up completely unappropriately dressed for a race and then just started eating everything he could find. So then he comes to an apple orchard and started to eat apples, which turned out to be rotten. How he didn't notice that, one can only guess. This caused severe stomach cramps, so he lay down and took a nap. We also have the first reported drug abuse in the history of modern day sports. So the American Thomas Hicks, who is one of the favorites, I don't even know, all right, you tell me if you think this is a performance-enhancing drug. So he was fed a mix of raw egg whites and strychnine 7 miles before the finish line. And I mean, I think we can all agree that's not fair, is it? It's just, why? All right. So strychnine, of course, it's a poison, and it's used, we know, as rat poison. But just like arsenic, it can apparently also be used as a stimulant. And the thing is, back then, there were absolutely no rules about performance-enhancing drugs in sports. So you could have as much fucking egg white strychnine as you wanted, and no one was ever going to tell you to stop. Oh, God. All right. What else happened? Oh, okay. So the Smithsonian article mentioned the American runner Fred Lors. So he was in the leading group of the marathon when he started to suffer from some leg cramps, probably on account of all the dehydration. So he stopped a car and asked the people in it to give him a ride, and they were like, sure, hop in. So while passing all the other runners, he just fucking waved out the window at him, rode in his car for 11 miles, recovered comfortably from his leg cramps, then emerged from the vehicle and finished the race in just under 3 hours, placing first.
What a surprise.
Who would have seen that coming? Except for literally every guy he fucking passed in a car. So the crowd is ecstatic, and they're chanting an American one, an American one. And Alice, who is the daughter of President Theodore Roosevelt, is placing the laurel wreath on his head. And that's done. And then she's about to hang the gold medal around his neck. And all of a sudden, the people he had passed had started to arrive at the finish line, and the ruse was discovered, and the chants turned into angry threats and boos. And Fred Lors was like, I'm just kidding. Don't worry. I was just kidding. Sorry. Here, take all this back. I'll see myself out. In the meantime, Thomas Hicks, who was given even more strychnine and egg white, this time they added a little bit of brandy, because if there's one thing that's going to help you when you're dehydrated on a marathon course, it's just a little bit more alcohol. Yeah, he finally started to show signs of strychnine poisoning once they added that brandy to the mix. So from the same article, I will link to this obviously in our sources because this thing is a gem. Quote, he began hallucinating, believing that the finish line was still 20 miles away. God, can you imagine how awful that would have been? Ugh. In the last mile, he begged for something to eat. Then he begged to lie down. He was given more brandy, but refused tea. He swallowed 2 more egg whites. Poor guy. That fucking egg whites. He refused tea, but he's just horked down a couple of slimy egg whites. It's so gross. Why? Oh, okay. He swallowed 2 more egg whites, and then he walked up the first of the last 2 hills, and then jogged down on the incline. Swinging into the stadium, he tried to run, but was reduced to a graceless shuffle. His trainers carried him over the finish line, holding him aloft. Sorry. Holding him aloft while his feet moved back and forth, and he was declared the winner. I just keep imagining those videos of people like holding a corgi just above a swimming pool and their little feet moving. All right, back to the article. It took 4 doctors and 1 hour for Hicks to feel well enough just to leave the grounds. He had lost 8 pounds during the course of the race. I know my diet. It's just about to change. All right, he had lost 8 pounds during the course of the race and declared, quote, never in my life have I run such a tough course. The terrific hills simply tear a man to pieces, quote. Hicks and Lors would meet again at the Boston Marathon the following year, which Lors won without the aid of anything but his legs, end quote. So that is the crazy story of the first Olympic marathon on U.S. soil. I just can't with them. His trainers picked him up and carried him across the finish line while his legs
and
made
he
running
won.
motions, and he ran. I don't understand this whole... It really makes me laugh, the idea of just the feet moving. Oh, man. That is,
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I don't think I ever gonna run a marathon.
That sounds exactly how I imagine most marathons are. That sounds on brand for how I imagine marathons to be. I don't know. God love the people who do it. So, yeah. All right. Do you have something good for this week? Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I go first because mine is not super exciting, I have to say it. First of all, I'm super thankful for modern technology. I think I've said it before, but it's lovely that I'm able to watch Netflix with my husband, because what we usually do is we call each other on WhatsApp and then we do the little countdown of 3, 2, 1, play. And then we can watch a show or a movie together. And we just binged Freud on Netflix. It's an Austrian-German show. It's kind of the Alienist. It's Freud facts. A little bit of facts meet a lot of fiction, but it's fun. It's super entertaining, and one of my favorite Viennese actors in it, Georg Friedrich. And I know that you guys won't be able to appreciate the way he talks, but it cracked me up so much. It's
nice.
So funny. Just watch it. It's really entertaining. It's a good watch if you're bored and want something to take your mind off things.
It sounds good. I also need to watch, everybody's talking about the Tiger King.
It's the best thing that could happen at this moment.
Is it?
I mean, I knew the story from the podcast, Joe Exotic, but when you see it, it's unbelievable.
I need to watch this. Yes. So, my something good is, mine's a bummer. I just really want to say thank you to hospice nurses and to the VNA health aides. We couldn't have gotten through the last couple weeks without them. My mom was very afraid of hospitals and of doctors, and taking medicine was really difficult for her. So it really meant the world to all of us that she was able to be at home with her family when she passed away. So that was incredibly helpful, and we're just very grateful. My recommendation is This Podcast Will Kill You. I'm about to listen to their very comprehensive episode on this. Also, the WHO, the World Health Organization, is a very great place to find updated information on the virus. So, we hope that this slightly lighter episode brightens your day a little bit. If you have a moment, please say hi in our Facebook group. You will find it if you search Fresh Hell Murder, and it's a great group of people and a nice distraction from daily life.
If you want to, please do us the favor and rate or review us on iTunes. It helps us out a lot, really a lot.
Really, please.
It's how other people can find us.
Yeah.
If you want to, you can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram. We are there.
We are. Say hi to your pets. Tell them we love them and we miss them.
Please don't give them beer.
No, don't give them beer. And until next week, please stay well. And if you're going through hell,
keep running. Tschüss.
Bye.